welcome, and again, we're delighted that you're stepping up to take on this incredibly important role. One of the things that was mentioned earlier was congressional oversight, and there has been frustration expressed in this committee over my tenure on this committee the last several years that we don't get the kind of responses that we need to be able to do effective oversight. And look, this is not a partisan issue, and it shouldn't be. And as the chair of the subcommittee, the Permanent Subcommittee Investigations, we've worked on a totally bipartisan basis, and we've done some good work, but it requires the administration to be responsive. I would say that it might be helpful for me to give you a specific example rather than just sort of talk generally about it. And it has to do with what Senator McCaskill talked about earlier, which is this ability for us to focus on the supply side with drugs coming into our country. So we're doing an investigation, and I'm not going to get into detail about the investigation because we tend to keep those non-public at PSI. But we're trying to get information from the front lines as to what's happening with regard to looking at packages. We know fentanyl is the #1 killer now in my home state of Ohio. It is increasingly the drug that is even pushing out heroin and other opioids. It's a synthetic drug. It's inexpensive. Most of it comes from China. Most of it comes through the mail system. Private carriers, as you know, have to provide this advanced electronic data, which we'll talk about in a second. The Postal Service doesn't. Therefore, traffickers use the Postal Service. We want to know, how can we stop this poison from coming into our communities? And we all have, in this committee, have focused on the demand side. That's important, prevention, education, treatment, recovery. But we also know that if we can stop this poison from coming in, it will save lives and at a minimum raise costs for these street drugs. So we want to interview the online people who are actually doing the inspection of packages at JFK, at your other sites where you have the post office bringing in overseas packages. We are told by DHS, no, those are too low-level people. You have to interview the supervisors. And we persist. They continue to say no. So we say, okay, we interview the supervisors. We interview the supervisors. They don't have the information for us. In fact, I will tell you, even the supervisors, one of them at least, refused to look at the emails to be able to provide us some responsive answers, which was frustrating. But you know what they told us? You need to talk to the online people. So DHS refuses to allow us to talk to the online people. We go to the supervisors at their request. The supervisors say, we really don't have the firsthand knowledge. You need to talk to the folks on the front line. So I just wanted to give you that as a very specific, real-time concern that we have right now in the PSI subcommittee. And I think, if Senator Carper were here, he would echo my concerns. He's the ranking Democrat on that committee. We don't want to have to go to subpoenas, but we will. And so I would just like the commitment that you expressed to me in private in our meeting about this broad topic, that you will work with us to enhance the responsiveness of the department. It is a big, sprawling department with a lot of management challenges and a lot of layers. We want the commitment that you will work with this committee, which is the committee vested with the responsibility for providing oversight over DHS to respond to congressional inquiries.
Thank you, sir, for that question. You have my commitment. I think, as we've discussed, there is more important partnership, perhaps, with a large department with its large scope, to be very clear with respect to the policies regarding oversight and transparency. I believe those are keys not only to leadership, but to the effective partnership that's required to combat the threats today. So you would have my commitment that any question that you have, we would be responsive and provide you the information you need to do your job, which in turn helps us to do our job.
I think sending that message from the top is very important, and I think, again, my colleagues on both sides of the aisle would appreciate that. On this issue of drugs coming into the country, let me ask you about a specific legislative initiative. Most members of this committee have been involved in what's called the STOP Act.
Yes,
and it simply says that with regard to private carriers, you have to have the advanced electronic data as to what's in the package, where it's from, where it's going. That helps law enforcement, CPB in particular, be able to identify those packages and stop some of this poison coming in. And I've seen this at facilities of these private carriers, UPS facilities or DHL facilities, same thing at FedEx facilities. At the post office, there's not that requirement through the Postal Service. In 2002, this Congress required the private carriers to do it and said the post office should too. We're going to give them some time. Let's have a report. That was 15 years ago. And even today, the post office is pushing back. So what I would like to hear today from you is your commitment to getting this legislation through. It's very simple. It says the post office has to require the same advanced electronic data so that your folks can actually identify this poison coming in. And when we talk to CPB, of course, they are very interested in having this legislation passed. They need this tool. When we talk to the postal inspector, same thing. We talk to local law enforcement, same thing. The legislation has not moved, in part because the post office has pushed back. In the last 2 weeks, the commission that the president formed on opioids specifically recommended passage of the STOP Act.
Yes.
So now the administration is sort of on record officially. Can you give us your commitment today that you will support the STOP Act and help us to get this legislative fix on this one area completed so that we can begin to make progress keeping the supply of these drugs out of this country?
Yes, sir. And I also look forward, should I be confirmed, to providing any technical assistance that's necessary to make sure that we can implement it effectively, working with the U.S. Post Office and working with Customs and Border Patrol to ensure that they have the resources and personnel they need to play their part.
Well, thank you. So many other questions. I will, for the record, ask some questions with regard to the security in the faith community, because this is one of the issues that we continue to struggle with. I will also be asking some questions on the management side per our discussion earlier about the complexity of the challenge that you have, and particularly workforce management. But again, we appreciate the fact that you are here today as a nominee with your experience and your background to be able to help during a critical time.